When I was younger, my family rented a beach house for a weekend one summer. The house rental was cut extremely short, and this is why. It was our first day there. We went to the beach and then went out to eat for dinner. The sand dunes were very hilly near the house, and that night, my brother Joey and I came up with the idea of sand sledding down the hills. We found a couple big cardboard boxes in one of the closets in the house, so we cut pieces off the boxes to use a sled. Our parents didn't mind us going out of the dark as long as we wouldn't stray too far away from the house. We found what seemed to be the tallest part of the sandhill and started riding down the pieces of cardboard box as if they were sleds. It worked pretty well, actually. When Joey made it to the bottom, I'd say his third or fourth time, he called up to me, "Tyler, what is that?" I didn't see what he meant, so I slid down the hill again and looked at what he was pointing at. It was something in the ocean. It was this black object sticking out from the water. The moon's reflection on the ocean was just enough to see these objects, but not know what it is. It looked like something was definitely floating in the water, though. We were a little freaked out and were too scared to go closer and look at what it was, so we walked a little further down the beach to look for a different hill. We found one that wasn't as tall, but it was still near enough to the house. My brother slid down the hill first. I stood at the top, watching. I looked out to the ocean again, and I saw that black object in the water again. It's as if we didn't even move, or as if it followed us. I yelled at Joey to look at the ocean again. He looked and probably saw it right away because he ran up the hill to me, freaked out. We were discussing what we thought the thing could be. Maybe we didn't move as much as we thought we did. We stared at the object for a while and we could see it bopping around a bit. We looked down the beach at the house we were staying at. It wasn't too far away, so we decided to get a closer look at this floating object. We thought maybe it was a dead animal floating in the water. We couldn't have been more wrong. As we got maybe halfway to the water, the black object floating around bobbing in the water started to rise, and we realized it wasn't floating at all. A person's body was revealed as they stood up at a towering height, arms now flat at their sides. It was a person's head this whole time. We ran to the house and slammed the door behind us, yelling to our parents. Our parents seemed confident that there was no threat from someone going for a night swim, though, even after we said they were following us in the water. Our dad went out to the backyard deck with the lights on and looked around the beach, but he didn't see anyone. He told us we had nothing to worry about. Later that night, we heard our mom scream from the living room. Joey and I were in the room we were sharing. We jumped out of our beds to rush outside and see what it was. As we entered the living room, our dad yelled at us to go back to our room, but we didn't listen right away. They were looking at something outside. We walked over to see what it was they were staring at, close enough to see him. A naked, smiling man on the backyard deck, weaving. My dad then physically moved us back into our bedroom and told us not to come out. We heard everything as our dad was screaming threats of calling the police at the man. And there was a loud bang from the glass of the back door, accompanied with the sound of our mom screaming. Our dad yelled at our mom to go stay with the kids. She came into the room and tried to comfort us while we heard our dad calling 911, all while hearing periodic bangs on the glass. Our dad is not a big guy and he's far from a fighter, so the chances of him going outside to confront that man himself were slim to none unless it was absolutely necessary. This went on for a few minutes before the bangs stopped and our dad seemed calmer. A bunch of police cars came to the house. There were more police officers in the house than I can remember counting. My brother and I were asked to describe what we saw on the beach to help tie the whole story together. Our parents, to this day, tell us that the most likely explanation was a child predator on drugs. It was a very sick and disturbing thing for our entire family to go through. In fact, 12 years later, it's still cringing and disturbing to think back on. And yes, the obvious answer to the obvious question. Did we leave after that encounter? Yes, we did, and our parents got their money back. We ended up staying at a nearby resort so as not to waste the weekend, but obviously we were all a bit shaken up after that. I have a beach house in Florida that I tend to visit with my girlfriend in the colder months up north. In the warmer months, we'd still visit occasionally, but nowhere near as much since there wasn't as much of a need to. It was early February, freezing up in Connecticut. So my girlfriend and I took a trip down to Florida to visit the beach house. By the time we actually got to the house after the day-and-a-half drive, it was starting to get dark out. It was actually a long month and a half since I'd been there last at the time. The electricity, the water, and everything was already on since it was wintertime, and I kept everything on during the winter season due to our frequent visits. So all we had to do when we arrived at the house was unpack, take a couple lounge chairs, and walk 20 seconds onto the beach and take a nap. We didn't even check out any of the other rooms because we were so drained. We lounged on the beach until it got really dark. My girlfriend tapped my shoulder. I looked up at her and she asked if I left the light on. I turned to the house and saw one of the upstairs lights on. Not just that, but that one of the windows in that room, there was a shadow outline behind the partially opened curtains. I looked at my girlfriend, and she looked at me, and I think it sunk into both of us that someone was in that room at that window. I ran to the house as fast as I could. When I got to the back door is when I started being quiet. I slid it open and shut quietly, and being that I was barefoot, made tiptoeing a bit easier. I made it to the stairway, and then halfway up the stairs before I heard a door shut. I went up the remaining stairs a bit quicker now, and saw that the door to the room that had the light on was open, but the lights were off now. I went into the room which had the light on not even 2 minutes ago. I kept the light off though. Instead, I just used the flashlight which I have on the shelf ledge upstairs. Then I remembered the closet door. It was shut. That must have been the door I heard close, I figured. I shut off the flashlight as I tiptoed to the door of the closet and slowly put my ear up to it to listen. There was nothing but silence in the room and on the other side of the closet door. I wasn't sure what was going to happen when I opened that door, if someone was in fact on the other side, but I had to confront this. I grabbed the 2 little knobs and finally brought myself to yank the doors open, but it was empty there, or at least, from what I could tell, it was dark. I grabbed my flashlight and switched it on. The closet was empty, but a creak in the floorboards outside of the room caught my attention. I ran into the hall expecting to see the intruder, but no. It was just my girlfriend. I got mad at her for coming into the house even though I told her to stay put. But now that she was there, I told her to help search upstairs. We looked around in all 3 bedrooms, upstairs, all the closets, and the bathroom. But there was no one. Then we checked the downstairs, every room, every closet. No one. We had to figure that whoever was in the house somehow escaped. So we locked all the doors and looked around the house for any signs of breaking and entering or stolen items. But there was none of that. So we brushed up and went to bed since we were exhausted. However, that night, before we could even fall asleep, there was a click under our bed. I asked my girlfriend if she could hear that. She said yes. I got out from under the bed and got down on my knees. When my face got to the ground level, it gave me a view under the bed. I could see the intruder laying under our bed. I looked at him face to face before he crawled out and made a break for the front door. I couldn't catch him once he got outside because I was still barefoot. I also didn't get a very good look at his face because we only looked at each other for about a second. We once again searched the whole house to see what he could have stolen, but surprisingly nothing was stolen. We couldn't even figure out how he broke in. We didn't call the cops. We simply moved on and did our best to enjoy the rest of our vacation. This took place back around 2008 if my memory serves me right. Me and my family had just moved to Costa Rica, and we enjoyed spending most of our time at the beach. One beach in particular, which was near a lovely little river that I like to swim in. It was on this same beach that a 9-year-old me found a dead body floating in the ocean. To give a little context, I have been playing on the beach, which we thought was a relatively safe beach, so my parents were farther up. How wrong we were about it being safe. I remember seeing something floating in the water, but I wasn't sure what it was. So I went to investigate and found the dead man just floating there. Part of his leg had been hacked off. He obviously had not drowned. The man had clearly been murdered. Around this time, we had heard about a recent string of murders that had happened both on the Caribbean side of Costa Rica, where we were, and on the Pacific side. The murders have been happening every 6 months, rotating in between both regions of the country. So there was reason to assume this murder had been done by the same person, since it seemed to fit the timeline. As far as I can remember, the details of the murder were never disclosed in any of the local newspapers, only that the man had been a tourist from England, so there was no way for anyone who had not seen the man on the beach to know the specifics of his murder. Eventually, the whole thing blew over, and we returned to that same beach. I can't quite remember a time frame, but it was definitely within a few months of me finding the dead man that this next part happened. One day I was swimming in the river with my mother when a very strange man popped up out of the water, startling us. He had a spear gun in his hand and a snorkel mask on. Anyways, he began talking to my mom, and I think we could both tell that something was just off about this guy. I wasn't really paying much attention for most of their conversation, but I do remember him bringing up the recent murder on the beach, and he seemed to know a great lot of details about it, which, as I previously mentioned, were not available to the public. It almost seemed as if he was trying to confess that he was the one who murdered the man, but without directly saying so. He also talked about how he traveled in between the Caribbean and the Pacific side of Costa Rica, spending half a year in each spot. Eventually, they also got on the topic of what he did for a living, and he went into a great detail about how he made the masks for the movie Eyes Wide Shut. And then he would make those masks, and I would presume other ones, based on real-life human emotions, and that he specifically likes capturing the look of fear. We were totally taken back by this guy and didn't really know what to do. Eventually, he just got back into the river and swam away, and thankfully we never saw him again. I do not know if this is related or not, but the weird string of murders suddenly stopped after that.